Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, but this is a list of all Pokemon in generations 1 through 7 and tells us which Pokemon made it into Sword and Shield. So green means they are in the Galar Dex, orange means they get a Galarian form, and white, well, process of elimination, both figuratively and literally. Now, we knew about most of the Pokemon on this list going into the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield. There's about 250 existing Pokemon that were shown through official reveals and announcements and trailers and stuff like that, and you've probably done a lot of work on your own end to try to figure out if one of your favorite Pokemon has survived the Dex cut. But now that Pokemon Sword and Shield has been released, people are compiling the Dex, they're seeing where all the Pokemon are, how many there are, and it looks like there's going to be over 300 returning Pokemon out of the entire Galar Dex, which is only 400. So, as it stands, people are pretty much aware of this number. You know, 400 Pokemon in the Galar Dex. It ends at Eternatus. We have a little over 80 new Generation 8 Pokemon. Then we have like a dozen Galarian forms and evolutions of those. And then the rest of those are going to be Pokemon that we've been kind of seeing bouncing around in trailers and in discussions and stuff like that. However, that is not the end of the story, because it looks like, through the Datamine, there's a couple of secret Pokemon that have data inside of the games. So this is just like a little bit that you can see right here. We got Mewtwo, we got Mew, we got some Mythicals, we got Generation 5 Legendaries, and then Kanto starters. There's also more than that. And this was kind of weird, because when you're going through the data mine, there's actually data for these Pokemon, but not for anything else. So if we look on the right, Wooper is Pokemon 194. Well, the other Pokemon above it is Sudowoodo, and Sudowoodo is 185. So there's a big chunk of Pokemon missing there. However, if you go to the start of the data mine, or you just look up movesets and stuff like that, you can see Bulbasaur is in, as well as all of the other Pokemon that I've highlighted and that we're going to be talking about in this video. So they have data inside the games where none of the other cut Pokemon are actually programmed into the games at all, it seems. So that's really interesting, and then we can see that this right here is the full list. So we have the Kanto starters, we got Mewtwo, Mew, Celebi, Jirachi, then we got legendaries from Generation 5, but we don't have the Forces of Nature. And then Keldeo's just splashed in, Generation 7 starters. That's really interesting. Then we also have Generation 7 legendaries and mythicals, then Meltan and Melmetal, wherever they belong in this crazy chain of Pokemon madness, since they were introduced in like Generation 7.5 with Let's Go, and now there's actually a Gigantamax for Melmetal. So things are pretty crazy, and I guess that's going to tie in when we actually end up with a Meltan Melmetal event or something of the sort. But let's talk about how we end up getting these Pokemon, because that could also be pretty fancy. That since there's no way of encountering these Pokemon inside the games, but there's data for them, it seems like there's going to be a couple of events. Now, I wouldn't consider this DLC. And there's interviews of Game Freak saying, nah, we're not going to be doing any DLC for Pokemon Sword and Shield. We're not going to be adding any more new Pokemon. What you get is what you get. But they programmed a few other extras to kind of give that surprise and then expand the Dex beyond what we know. Also, we already had the confirmation of Mew being inside of Pokemon Sword and Shield for a very long time, but it wasn't anywhere in the 1 to 400 original Galar Dex. That's generally how Mythicals go. They don't really count for the Dex, and then they take a while to discover, and then you get your information about them. But if you get the Pokeball Plus, it contains the Mythical Pokemon Mu when purchased new. Now, I'm actually recording this video a few days before Pokemon Sword and Shield comes out, and then I'm publishing it after launch, mostly because I don't want Nintendo Ninjas to take me down for copyright if they don't want any data mine information about the games before the games launch, so I don't know how this is going to work. Wait, never mind, all you have to do is scroll down. So, this is actually some pretty weird stuff. Unlike in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, you will be unable to use the Pokeball Plus as a controller in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Also, if you've already received Mew in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, you'll be unable to receive Mew from the same Pokeball Plus in Pokemon Sword or Pokemon Shield, and you will only be able to receive Mew once per Pokeball Plus. No extra save files. If you delete the Mew accidentally, you don't get it back. It is just one Mew per Pokeball Plus, and that is it. And what this says is, like, there's going to be very few legitimate Mews out in the wild. If anyone is offering or giving away a Mew, it is 100% going to be hacked, because like, if you can't use the Pokeball Plus inside of Pokemon Sword and Shield, and you primarily get it for Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, people have already cashed in that Mew. So it's gonna be like a weird circumstance to where, unless you forgot to download Mew in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, or bought Pokemon Let's Go very recently, like right before Pokemon Sword and Shield come out, you've already claimed it, and you're not gonna be able to get it in Pokemon Sword and Shield. So we're going to see how Mew develops as a future event, but it's going to be very exclusive at start. But then going back to the events, we've already known about Dynomax Crystals, and Dynomax Crystals are used to just get regular Pokemon. That Larvitar into Tyranitar doesn't have any kind of Gigantamax, so this is just a way of getting an early Tyranitar or Jangmo-o inside of your games, and it ties in with bundles and stuff like that. So if there's going to be any kind of event that gives us a Dynomax Crystal, which there is in-game data for. So there's actually many Dynomax Crystals, and the thing is, the Dynomax Crystals don't have any direct categorization inside of the Datamine. That we have and 15, an item that causes Dynamax to appear from the Watchtower layer in the wild area until the end of the day, but doesn't just say like Jangmo-o Crystal or Jangmo-o Dynamax Crystal or anything like that, so we don't know which ones are which and how that's going to work with it, but there's a ton of listings for these, so what it shows is that there's going to be a lot of Dynamax Crystal events, and doesn't necessarily mean these 35 unknown Pokemon to the Dex as well. That there could just be a cool event for a really powerful Pokemon, and they try to tie it in that way. There could also be like Gigantamax Crystals, just to kind of give someone a guaranteed Gigantamax. So I think that's a really cool element of Pokemon distribution. That's also not the only way that they're giving away Pokemon. If you want to get Gigantamax Meowth, you just get it for free. Obtain a special Meowth that can Gigantamax as an early purchase bonus. This special Meowth can Gigantamax will be gifted as an early purchase bonus for Pokemon Sword and Shield players. You will be able to receive this special Meowth by selecting Get Via Internet option in Mystery Gift from Friday, November 15th to Wednesday, January 15th, 2020. So it does show that there's going to be multiple ways of receiving event Pokemon inside of Pokemon Sword and Shield, but I think it's much better than with like the 3DS events. Almost every 3DS event was either code or you just straight get it from the internet. Yay! Isn't that so fun and exciting? But now that means there's going to be like different options. And then there's the Pikachu and Eevee event. So if you have save data for Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu or Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, you can also obtain these Pokemon in the Wild Area Station in the game. And that's when you reach it after about 2 hours of gameplay. Individual gameplay time may vary, and it sounds like you can actually make it to the wild area quite a bit sooner than that if you're an experienced Pokemon player. So there's going to be like the Wild Area Station for specific events and stuff like that, Mystery Gift, and then just receiving a Dynamax Crystal, which you then cash in at the Watchtower lair, and then trigger the Dynamax battle for that. Now, those aren't the only way of unlocking event Pokemon either, because we still have the Pokemon Pass. So the Pokemon Pass has actually been getting a lot of usage recently. That if you go to Best Buy, you can get a code for Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee that gives you Mewtwo, or you could also have gone to GameStop and then get a code for that shiny Solgaleo or Lunala, and this also means that maybe Pokemon on this list are going to be unlocked when Pokemon Bank Transfer becomes allowed, and maybe it's not only going to be for those exclusive Pokemon, because it is kind of strange that right at the end of Generation 7, we finally have access to shiny legendary Pokemon, and then they don't get to do anything. So it looks like this is also to open up some certain event Pokemon, such as this Mewtwo. So you can bring the Mewtwo you got inside of Let's Go into Pokemon Sword and Shield once Pokemon Bank becomes accessible, as well as the starter Pokemon, because that makes more sense instead of having just Charmander, as well as the starter Pokemon from Generation 7. As for Generation 5, that could be a Dynamax event. That could be some kind of Pokemon Pass event, because maybe you use the Pokemon Pass, you get the code, it puts a crystal into your inventory, and then you can use that whenever, or maybe it could also just be a via Wi-Fi event at some point. I don't know, we still haven't seen these events yet, but it is really good to have an understanding as to what events are happening for Pokemon Sword and Shield, and how they tie in with other events that happened before Pokemon Sword and Shield. But I'm just thinking that could be really awesome if you can get Mewtwo in a max raid battle. That would be like the ultimate challenge to catch the ultimate event Pokemon, or maybe it'll happen for some of the Mythicals, or Reshiram and Zekrom, since those Pokemon are a part of the Datamine. And I'm guessing maybe for the Mythicals, it might not only be a Dynamax, so you just get it for some kind of Wi-Fi event. And that would be pretty cool. So as long as it isn't that every event is super free, I'm really down with this. I can't wait to see how the distribution is done. Maybe for participating in online competitions, you get a code that gets you a Dynomax Crystal, and it's for like a really powerful Pokemon or something like that. Or maybe it's all through Pokemon Pass. We'll find out. But that's pretty good stuff. And then for the rest of the video, I want to give my thoughts on the actual Pokemon that are available. So we just discussed how we can get them, why we're getting them, what it possibly means, the tie-ins with Pokemon Bank and everything. So it looks like all of your work isn't completely being undone, and there's still a couple of secrets inside the game. Now, if there is DLC, or if there are going to be a few other Pokemon, that's going to be interesting. We still really haven't seen anything for Generation 8 Mythicals, so maybe Game Freak knows that we datamine that stuff. It's going to kind of be like a Zeraora situation, where it was delayed until we found out about all of the Generation 7 Mythicals and new Pokemon and stuff like that. So maybe they're going to like do an event DLC, and then that's when we finally see our first Mythicals for Generation 8. Or maybe they're phasing out Mythicals because now that Game Freak has confirmed that they're not going to have every Pokemon in any Pokemon game moving forward, that keeping up with that, the events, which Pokemon are allowed where, when you're not going to see a Pokemon for potentially 1 or 2 games, so a couple of years a Pokemon could be excluded. Mythical Pokemon already get the short end of the stick on that, so reducing Mythicals and Legendaries, we don't have a trio Legendary inside of Pokemon Sword and Shield. I think it makes sense, and it's a good decision for Pokemon moving forward. But yeah, going back to the starter Pokemon, so we have the most recent generation of new starter Pokemon, and then the oldest generation of starter Pokemon, which is kind of reminiscent of what happened in Generation 6. And I think it kind of makes about as much sense to add the Kanto Pokemon because we have Let's Go. So the most recent main series Pokemon game, you get all the starters there, you bring them over, boom, you're good to go. And if that transfer is available, a lot of people did shiny hunts. There's going to be a lot of shiny starter Pokemon running around, and they're going to be pretty competitively viable because it was also really easy to get competitively viable Pokemon inside of Let's Go. Same thing for Generation 7. We just got to play with them for a little bit of time. Having them get taken out for a couple years, that really wouldn't make too much sense, so they're all kind of coming together, and I think that's a really nice thing. I also don't believe that there's any Generation 1 pandering going on here, and I think it also would have been a safe move to just have Charmander. Like, having just Charmander means that that argument of like, oh, it's just Generation 1 pandering couldn't really exist, and then that also leaves the door open, just kind of have all of the starter Pokemon inside the next games. With this, it's kind of weird, because they did splash in the other Kanto starters, kind of round it out, and then they did add more than just Generation 1 starters. So we have a nice little grouping, and I think this just opens up for Diamond and Pearl remakes, because like we saw with the Ruby and Sapphire remakes, all of the other starter Pokemon that weren't available inside of Pokemon X and Y became available through the post-game. So I'm wondering if Game Freak is going to do that, if Generation 7 isn't going to be in the Diamond Pearl remakes, or maybe they'll just like kind of keep all the starters in from there on out, and they just kind of wanted to give us a little bit of starter. Because I've already seen a lot of comments of people saying like, oh, where's my Greninja? Or, oh, I just want to transfer over X starter Pokemon because it's my favorite, and then use only that. However, that kind of undermines the Generation 8 starters. So it's a very reasonable decision to not have all of the starters competing with the fresh batch of starters, and then giving just a little touch of some of the other ones. You know, it's not like we're going to have Litten, Popplio, Rowlet, Squirtle, Bulbasaur, Charmander completely outshine all of the new Generation 8 starters, and then they all kind of mesh together, integrate with the rest of the decks, and then hopefully we just have all the starters from here on out. We will see how Game Freak handles it with that. Next up, Mythical Pokemon. Once again, I kind of touched on this. Mythical Pokemon are weird because it could be years until we see the first Mythical Pokemon available inside of that generation, or it could be years since it was like made available one time obscurely. Many of them are shiny locked because it just be like that, and then random shiny events come out, and then you just kind of have to be stuck with them. So Mythical Pokemon are a thing, and these are the ones that are going to be inside of Pokemon Sword and Shield, so just kind of splashing them in for events, maybe Dynamax battles, maybe for free. Who knows about that? Meltan, Melmetal, that's going to be weird because of the Pokemon Let's Go transfer, and since it's only available inside of Pokemon Go, just kind of making it a universal event for everyone makes sense for Pokemon Sword and Shield because it doesn't have the lore that was tied in with the release of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. I just said a lot of words and names of Pokemons and games. It's kind of confusing, but Mythical Pokemon are a mess. But it's also a pleasant surprise to see some Pokemon just kind of hiding somewhere inside of Generation 8. And then we get into the Legendaries. So, once again, Generation 7 Legendaries, much like Generation 7 starters, keep them around, play around with them for a bit. Also, since we finally got these shiny Pokemon, seems to be a calculated play to kind of tie everything together, so that's nice, which really just means Generation 5. It's weird, because people say that there's Generation 1 pandering in these games, but Generation 5 has more Pokemon represented in the Galar Dex than any other generation, both in actual numbers and percentage of the Dex, and now they're getting the only Trio Legendary and the only Dual Legendaries as well. Also, James Turner is the art director for Pokemon Sword and Shield, so I think that makes a lot of sense. But at some point, we're just going to have these legendaries available. That's going to be pretty cool, and I think it's good competitively. No forces of nature, no other weird stuff going on. Terrakion, it can be a little... it's not even like problematic. It can be common inside of doubles, but at least it's a healthy kind of common, you know? It's a vulnerable Pokemon, you can beat it, and it does have some good power behind it, so that's some fun stuff, and then we'll see how the other changes to the meta, to the items, to the stats, with the integration of the new Pokemon, work inside of Generation 8. And then Mythicals and Legendaries are forbidden anyways, so we don't really have to worry about them too much, and the starters, I think it's okay. I think Incineroar with Intimidate is really, really problematically centralizing, but that's just the problem with Intimidate more than anything else. However, we're going to see if expanded Dex Pokemon are allowed. That VGC might just make the entire rules, or any online competitions might be only Pokemon in the Galar Dex 1 through 400 will be usable, so anything in the expanded Dex will not be usable, and we've seen this rule set before in games like Pokemon XY, Pokemon Sun and Moon. But at least those Pokemon will be playable for non-super serious competitive, and then probably just allowed on Battle Spot, but not like the highest, craziest ranking or anything like that, and you'll still have some of your favorite Pokemon if it's in these lists of 35, but also shows expansion for future Pokemon games and other things going on with Generation 8. So if you guys enjoy the video, hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.